Hey guys, today we're going to go through a little bit of a smile design tutorial in Romexis 6. Smile design is a really cool tool to be able to communicate with your patients, communicate with the laboratory, or to throw into 3D wax up software to be able to convert a 2D smile design into a reality. So we're going to go through some of the fundamental basics of this software, not in any great detail. This is kind of an introduction. Hey guys, Wally Renee here, and I'm going to talk to you about facial measurements when you do aesthetic cases. This is Romexis Smile Design 6. The first thing that we're going to do is we set the inner pupillary line to make the pupils parallel to the horizon. So basically you click the first icon and then you move the red and blue dots to be right in line with the patient's pupil. That will also then set the midline and basically the base of the nose line. Good. So once you have that, you calibrate the photo to a measurement, and everybody on Earth has an iris diameter that's about 11.8 millimeters. So once again, you'll hit the calibrate icon, and then you'll drag that over the iris and type in 11.8 millimeters. What that does is sets the standard for the whole entire photo for all further measurements that you're going to do from here on out. Go ahead and hit the smile silhouette. We're going to ignore this really for now, but I'm just moving it to be kind of in the ballpark because it bothers me. But this is not the stage where we start diving into the smile because we don't really know what's wrong with the smile until we get some facial measurements. And so now that's when we're going to do some facial measurements. And Romexis has the ability to do quick measurements down here with the draw and measure tool. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop a horizontal line right at the glabella. As you know, the glabella is the most prominent point between the brow. Then we're also going to drop a horizontal or vertical line for the midline, which is right in between the kind of split distance of the inner pupillary line. This was already marked, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it again just so that we could see it as a permanent line on the photograph. I'm going to make it pink. All these lines are editable where you could change the color and things like that. Delete them if you want. The next line that I'm going to do is a horizontal line, and it's going to be the base of the nose. Remember guys, midline deviations are common and not that important. You could have a plus or minus 2 millimeter deviation and most people won't even know. It's more important to avoid a midline cant. So here we are. Just the base of the nose, which is subnasally. We're just marking that for some later measurements. And we're also going to mark menton. Right here, let's see. Let's get another horizontal line drop down there at menton. Change the color to green. So now we have these kind of 3 horizontal lines and 1 vertical line through the face. And we're going to keep going from here. Okay. Let's talk about this real quick. Let's go ahead and do some more measurements. The other type of measurement that I'm going to do is the mid-commissure line. Now you'll notice that the face is in repose. This is the most important photo that you need to take with your smile analyses that people often skip. Repose is the physiologic rest position of the face, so it's during the most relaxed state. It's where we need to be able to analyze facial measurements. So I dropped a line there in the mid-commissure line. That line evidently on most people is parallel to the inner pupillary line. So just something to keep in mind if for whatever reason you don't have a full face shot and you're just looking at the lips. If you make the commissure line parallel to the horizon to start off, it oftentimes helps. But now we are going to drop a line right in the inner pupillary line. So I'm going to drop it right, I'm going to click right in the middle of the pupil, just so I could have a horizontal line drop through there. And I'm checking to see if the mid-commissure line is parallel to that line. It looks like we're pretty good. She has slight smile asymmetry, but it's really within normal limits. All right, so we got a line right in the basically inner pupillary line. We got a midline marked. We got our glabella marked. We got our subnasally, we got our menton, we got our mid-commissure line marked. So we're pretty much all set to now do some measurements. So you're going to click the ruler icon and go to single measurement, and you're going to now drop a mid-face measurement. which is from the glabella to the subnasale. Okay, so we're going to be somewhere in the 60s here, 61 millimeters here. That's actually, the number's not so important because people do have different face sizes. It's the ratio that's important. So the mid face to the lower face, if you split the face into thirds, you want the lower third of the face to be the same length as the middle third of the face. So basically what we're going to do now is we're going to measure that lower third. So we're going to hit the ruler icon again, go to single measurement, and I'm going to drop a bead line down from subnasale to menton. Okay, so we're going to go down here, and we're at 65. So we do have a little bit of a discrepancy here, although it's not really profound, but it's about a 4 millimeter or so discrepancy, 4 or 5 millimeters. Not enough to really raise a lot of red flags, but it is showing that, you know, she has a little bit of a discrepancy between her mid face and lower face, okay, which could come in handy as we start to dive deeper into these facial analyses. So is that size discrepancy coming from the mandible or the maxilla? It's really important to figure that out as we start to look at her skeletal facial measurements. So remember that the mid face and the lower face is a 1-to-1 ratio during repose, okay? So if something's off, you have to then try to narrow it down to figure out if it's a mandible or a maxilla issue. You have to make sure that it's not something like vertical maxillary excess or excessive downgrowth of the maxilla, which would lead to kind of a gummy smile, which she does have a gummy smile, so that's a possibility. So we need to dive deeper and take some measurements here to see if it is indeed vertical maxillary excess. So we're going to go ahead and now measure the lower third of the face, and we're going to break it up into two sections. One is the mid-commissure line to menton, and now we're going to go to subnasale to mid-commissure line. And what you need to understand is that the maxilla portion, okay, needs to be 1/3 of the total distance, which in this case it's not. It's 16.3 millimeters, whereas 1/3 of 66 is 22. So she has a short maxilla. The maxilla needs to be 1/3. The mandible makes up 2/3 of that total distance of the lower third of the face. So we have an issue. It's not excessive vertical maxillary excess. It's not excessive downgrowth of the maxilla. She actually has a deficient maxilla. So that is not the issue causing her gummy smile. So we need to dive a little bit further to see what's going on with this smile, and if it's something that we could actually treat dentally, or is it skeletal. So if you look at the lower number of 48 for the mandible portion, it really should be 44. So she actually has a large mandible. Now we're going to measure tooth structure revealed in repose. So normally, okay, you want some tooth structure showing. So about 4 millimeters, male is 2 millimeters. So female is about 4 millimeters. She's in 5.7. A little bit of a toothy repose, okay? So we don't quite want that much. So what is the issue? What is going on with that? So let's measure her upper lip. Her upper lip is from subnasale to the wet dry line of the upper lip, and we're at 14.8. That is excessively deficient, guys. Normally for a female, we're going to be right about 22 to 22 millimeters is about the average for the lip length, plus or minus 2 millimeters, depending on whether you're male or female. Males actually have typically a little bit longer of an upper lip. And so we're very deficient on her upper lip here, which is probably why she shows so much tooth structure during repose, and might be why she has a gummy smile. We're going to move on to her smile in a minute here. But these are numbers that are just super important to understand before you start shaving down enamel and start doing restorations and things like that. And so as the first part of the smile design talk, we're going into kind of facial measurements and analyses. A lot of this is based off of Global Diagnosis by Dr. Robbins. So if you have a chance, buy that book. It's pretty fantastic. All right, so we have kind of our facial measurements. I'm going to go ahead and export this, and it will burn all the measurements into an image that I could keep in the electronic health record, or I just hit the little camera icon and it automatically snaps it into the Romexis 2D image catalog without having to export anything. But here I'm exporting it to save it to my desktop in case I want to send it to my laboratory or surgeon or orthodontist or whatever, that whoever I'm collaborating on in multidisciplinary care to figure out what to do with this patient, if anything. So we're going to actually go a little bit deeper into the facial measurements here and start to include another photo. We're going to actually merge her smile shot with her repose shot using Romexis image stitching algorithms, which is actually super cool. So we're going to hit that little icon here and we're going to find her smile shot. Let's see. It is downloaded somewhere. Let's see, there's some file shot. There it is, good to go. Just gonna double click it. And what you're gonna see is a really cool module that's gonna let us stitch these two separate and distinct images together, even if they're taken at different magnifications, which they are. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna drag the green and the blue dots to coincident points on the patient's face. I kind of like to stick to teeth just because I find it easier for me than trying to use, say, like pupils or the nose or soft tissue features. So I'm going to go down to the mesioincisal edge here and drag both green dots to the location, and then I'm going to go drag that blue dot to somewhere probably on the lateral or cuspid, depending on what I could see. Yep, right there, mesioincisal. So now I'm going to use the transparency bar, and what you're looking for are for the irises to be the same and the teeth not to move. So the irises stay exactly at the same height and the teeth don't move, because patients' faces will change depending on smile expression. So here now we have two perfectly merged images. So now I could measure things like lip mobility and gumminess of the smile and things like that, gingival reveal. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure lip mobility, because she has a little bit of a gummy smile. We know she has a short upper lip, and it could be accentuated with hyperactive lip mobility. So let's measure. So what we do to measure lip mobility is I already drew a line to where the lip was resting on the central incisor before, right there, showing how much tooth was displayed during repose. So now I'm going to drop a line from there to the inferior border of the upper lip, and I get 3.8 millimeters, which is insanely deficient for lip mobility, which in her case is actually good, because if she had a short upper lip with hyperactive lip mobility, she'd have a super gummy smile. Normally the lip moves up 6 to 8 millimeters. So it's kind of really working in her favor here that she doesn't have, she has a hypoactive lower upper lip where it's not really moving during smile. And this is maximum E smiles, so this is a high smile. But nevertheless, she's still showing a little bit of too much gingival display. Let's go ahead and measure that. I like to either measure at the centrals or laterals. I like to measure kind of the maximum gingival display area. So I'm going to go right above the lateral here. We're at 3.5. Typically, 2 millimeters or less is ideal. And she's really not that bad here, guys. So, you know, this is not the case where you would want to do like a Lefort 1 osteotomy and impact the maxilla back with a, you know, some crazy like bilateral mandibular sagittal split osteotomy or something like that. Like you normally, like if a patient had vertical maxillary excess, you would destroy this patient's facial aesthetics with an already short maxilla. In fact, you might want to come down with a maxilla with a Lefort, but then you have a hypoactive lower or small upper lip, which you would have to do a surgery to extend that. So it's all kind of a nightmare for this. So you really want to be as conservative as you can and provide realistic expectations on what you could do for this patient. So, and you know, her smile is really not that bad. Bolton discrepancy for sure, two sides, arch size discrepancy, but maybe a little bit of maybe orthodontic intrusion of the laterals to bring them up, followed by some veneers, would be potentially great, or some composite restoration. So let's go ahead and then go to the silhouette. And with this silhouette, all I'm going to do is a quick rough Romexis smile design here, putting the incisal edge right on the wet dry line of the lower lip. The numbers of the teeth and the ratios are all live. They're updated live. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink back that premolar and right click and mirror it to the opposite side. This is optional at this point, because as you'll see in the next video that we do, the tutorial, we are going to actually go deep into Romexis smile design silhouettes. But I'm just going to do a quick little silhouette here. Those numbers are way too big, 11.4. Now we're at 10.9 for the central. We need to be more around 10.5 for her, but probably going to try to shorten those just a smidge more. Sneak them up. Yeah, somewhere right around there. That's pretty good. Changing the gingival levels. I'm bringing the gingival zeniths right up to the maxillary lip for like a All right, so the next step is let's go ahead and take a deep dive into the Silhouette software. We've already done the facial analysis, and we're going to actually start from scratch now and do the kind of smile and retracted views. So we're going to go ahead and jump to that video and show you guys how to do that. Just saving everything here, and yeah, let's move on to the next step. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to reopen the patient back up and start a new Romexis smile design. And we're going to instead start with her full smile rather than starting with the repose photo. And once again, you could right click to rotate around, and we're just going to go in order on that top bar, roll the ball to zoom in and out. As you're working with Romexis software, it's a lot of freedom and flexibility. We're going to have to redo the interpupillary line, midline plane to set the horizon. To do this, you're going to move the red and blue dot right to the interpupillary line, perfectly in line with the pupils, and then that green dot is going to be kind of subnasally, once again marking that line, which is going to then throw a golden proportion line down to the silhouette. And then we're going to go ahead and recalibrate this shot by going to the calibration icon and firing off, just like we did before with the 11.8 millimeters of the iris diameter, to therefore get us some realistic numbers. Like I said before, guys, there's some really cool studies looking at thousands of people showing that most people have an 11.8 millimeter iris diameter, plus or minus 200 microns. Depending now whether or not you have glaucoma or some underlying health issues can change the iris diameter. Now, pupil diameters change persistently and constantly, but the iris diameter in humans remains relatively the same, which is kind of really cool. The next step is to go on to the smile design silhouette. And so what you're going to do is you're probably going to have to move the silhouette a little bit initially. The middle dot moves it up and down, left and right. The balls on the end move the smile arc. Okay, so these little balls here, if you click and hold, will basically allow you to change the size and the smile arc to follow the lip line. Okay. If you hit that little red ball at the bottom, it changes the midline cant, and I usually never mess with that because it comes right in from the software, so don't touch that bottom red dot. It comes in based on your interpupillary line and your midline that you drew earlier. If you see that square box surrounding all the teeth, if you click it and you get a little arrow, you could change the size of the teeth. And notice as you change the size of the teeth, the numbers are scaling live as well, and all your percentages and proportions are scaling. So if you want to go on a tooth by tooth basis now that you have it kind of in the ballpark, that's kind of the next step. I'm just kind of ever so slightly dragging all of them to make major changes. Now if you do a single tooth, you could likewise find the blue silhouette and you could change the size of the tooth and then right click and hit mirror to opposite side. So here I am just adjusting this premolar here. You could click each ball as well as a kind of a morph point. In addition, the whole entire blue box is a morph point where you could scale without deforming. And so then I mirror to the opposite side. If you want to add another morph point of another ball, you could double click that blue line. Before you start getting too fancy though, you can actually change the overall shape. There's several preset shapes loaded into the software, you know, tapered, squared, ovoid, things like that. I kind of like there's triangular. I kind of like the default one the best typically, so I never really adjust this unless the patient specifically asks for square or round teeth. The default one is kind of the best blend of them all. But the way that you get to that is you click that little black arrow down at the bottom of that silhouette icon up there. So now I'm just going to go through each tooth individually, making changes. And every time I make change on one, I typically right click and mirror to the opposite contralateral side so that I'm keeping everything relatively symmetrical. And once again, I'm in the silhouette tab. That's the blue highlighted box up there. And we're going to move on now to the, once I have them kind of in the area that I want, I'm going to move on to the lip silhouette. So you're going to click that area up there, and then you're going to move these ball morph points to kind of circle the lip area. If you needed to add another control point, just like with the tooth silhouettes, you could double click that blue line and add another ball to make another morph point. But this is going to set the kind of shadowing around the teeth. It's also going to let the incisal edges fall behind the lip when you're doing your design. Really try to get it as close as you can, double clicking to add more control points if needed. And then we're going to just kind of walk along. So now we're on the next step, which is to import a retracted photo. It could be from anywhere that you have your photos saved. It's important that when you do take a retracted shot that it's at the same exact angle as the smile shot. So what you're going to get is this module to kind of morph these two photos together, and you're going to use the green and blue circles, crosshairs, and you're going to find common points on each photo. By the way, to zoom in, you roll your ball on your mouse. So here I'm trying to kind of pick distinct features of her teeth that I could see in both photographs. Kind of that mesial incisal corner of the lateral and that kind of sharp lobe on the cuspid. And there's a transparency bar. You put it somewhere in the middle and you see how close are you between the two shots. We're really close, but I'm going to actually move my lateral to more of a posterior mark because I find it's more accurate. So I'm going to go a little bit more posterior with that first control kind of common point. And you can see as you move the point, you're getting a live update of how the images are stitched together. So I'm just going to tweak that one ever so slightly. There we go, it's really close. And so you can see as I come in and out here, the teeth are staying in the same position. So now when I go back to my silhouette, I could click this icon here and kind of alternate between retracted and smile. And so I'm going to start to fine tune my silhouette in the retracted view because her smile was hiding her crust tips of her premolars and canines. So I'm just going to quickly start to do some morphing using the blue circle control points and the entire silhouette, adding some points as needed, right-clicking and hitting mirror to opposite side when I make major changes. And now I'm going to start to change the transparency, the kind of all the special effects that you're able to manipulate: chroma, surface texture, reflectance, brightness, change the color of the teeth. And so I'm going to play around with those until I get something that's kind of a little bit realistic to what I want in her smile. And of course the patient's typically giving feedback at this point. Now it will look just a little bit cartoony, and I think that's good and bad. It's good because you know the patient understands it's a simulation. It's not ultra realistic, photorealistic, so they're just able to get kind of an idea of what their teeth would look like, and you're not held to any kind of standard to try to match that clinically. Some of these smile design softwares are too realistic, and it's kind of scary because you'll never be able to match that aesthetic, or it'd be very difficult to. With this, it's a little bit cartoony, and I like that because it just reminds the patient that, hey, this is just a simulation. There are ways that we can make them more realistic, and we'll go into that in a minute if you want to go for that photorealistic look of what might be achievable. And so once again, I'm just playing with these tools here. Got basically six tools to play with, and then you could go down and hit that split face icon there and kind of do a quick, it shows you a quick before and after side by side, which is really cool. So now, patient really likes the shape and everything like that. The proportions are really nice. Really filled out the smile. We added some length. We did some virtual aesthetic crown lengthening as well to bring the teeth up to the lip line. And so now what's the next step? Well, further to play with the images to start to alter color now based off of patient feedback. You have the shape the way you want it. You might do some small tweaks at this point, but there are some other ways to do this smile design without relying completely on the silhouette. And so we're going to go to the next icon, which is this little called clone brush or paint brush. And it's actually really powerful. It's like Photoshop for smiles. And what you're able to do is you're able to use warp, mirror, and clone to manipulate these teeth in space, and to be able to drag and pull and close spaces and mirror image teeth. So here we're going to use, right now, we're using the clone tool to add a little bit of material, and I didn't really love that, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to try the warp tool. These tools do take a little bit of time to get used to, so play around with these. Remember, there's the undo button that you have a bunch of undos. So right now I'm just stretching out her tooth number 1-1 or tooth number 8, adding a little crown lengthening, closing that diastema a little bit. She has a Bolton discrepancy. Now I'm going to use the mirror. I like that shape, and I'm going to mirror it to the opposite side. This does take a little bit of practice to get right, and sometimes you have to do it in a few tries. Okay, I kind of made it a little bit short, so I'm going to right click there and mirror that section. Okay, then I'm going to use same tool to add a little bit of width there. Now I'm going to go to warp, and I'm going to stretch that distal, round that off a little bit. And then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do the same thing. Warp tool is my favorite tool, and then I really like the clone and the mirror as well, but they're a little bit tricky to get used to. The only way to really close a diastema is with the mirror and the clone tool. You can't warp into a diastema space because it'll just move the diastema over. So here we're just trying to get it to match up to our silhouette because she really liked the silhouette. Okay, so we're overlaying the silhouette every now and then as we go, and so now we have a really realistic look. Don't forget, you could also make measurements in the software, so you could do facial measurements, facial analyses, and see if she has a deficient maxilla or vertical maxillary excess, or and you could do all those types of measurements, but really good for diagnosis. But here we are now with the kind of morphed teeth, and it's a lot more realistic look with the silhouette just overlaid but very translucent, so you kind of change the opacity of the silhouette so you could barely see it, and it gives you a little bit more of a realistic look to the smile before after preview. Okay, so now let's see, what are we going to do with this? You know, because this is cool, but we need to turn this into something that we can use. So the way that I like to do this is export this silhouette, and that silhouette is able to be used in any software really, because it stays kind of as this on the screen. Even if you minimize Romexis, it'll stay. So now I'm bringing it into Plancad Easy. This is a intraoral scan of this individual, and I'm marking my margin. Plancad Easy is not the best software on the planet for these huge cases because there's no chain mode. There's no mode that lets you not mark margins, where you could just kind of ghost over teeth, like you know, other softwares have that, like Exocad, and it's much easier to make big changes in those softwares. But nevertheless, it is still pretty powerful software for this. So here I am just tweaking this wax up, overlaying the silhouette of this smile design to get my length and everything correct, and knowing that I have to make some manipulations to the cervical area to get a perfect match. And so this is a little bit tricky to try to get that silhouette perfectly overlaid. Adding some surface texture and some anatomy now to make these teeth a little bit prettier. This whole wax up in real time would probably take me 15 minutes tops to do. Probably worth my time, I would think. In a program like Exocad, it would probably take 10 minutes, maybe less. But this software is really powerful. I actually like these tools better than Exocad as it relates to being able to add surface texture and really fine-tune manipulations. It's the initial setup that is not quite as good, where you're able to chain mode teeth like you can in Exocad, where here you really can't combine them all in a chain mode type fashion. And I don't like that you have to mark margins, where you could skip that step if you're doing an additive wax up in other softwares, and not have to worry about the suck down to margin and all that kind of stuff. So now that we have this wax up, we could, but Remexis is completely open, so we could export that wax up out as STL files. And here they are in Mesh Mixer. I'm trimming up the model really quick, the intraoral scan, and adding a base real quick. And I'm going to cut that base flat. Now I'm combining the wax ups to the model and making it watertight using the combine and all that kind of stuff. So there's another thing that you could do. You could actually export a STL silhouette of the smile design, and then you could wax in other softwares like Mesh Mixer or Exocad. So lots of really cool stuff. I know this was fast, but it's just a little introduction. There's a wizard tutorial when you get this software that basically teaches you how to do everything. So there's really no need. Play around and enjoy. Hope you have fun.